Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining today. I have really just loved this conference. I'm really excited. I heard a description this year of the conference being both visionary and pragmatic, and I have to agree. I'm getting a lot of good takeaways. My notebook is filling it quite a bit. So next we're going to talk about building blocks of resilience and designing supply networks of tomorrow. And I think we can all agree that the supply chain issues that have happened over the last few years with the pandemic and the geopolitical disruptions have really shown us that we have weaknesses in the United States in this area. So this panel is going to bring you some insights into policy, academia, and industry on what we can do to improve our supply chain or our supply networks and be more resilient. So me personally, I'm Jane Arnold. I've spent 35 years in manufacturing, most of that with chemical, but also discrete and additive. And my life mission has been about making the possible a reality. And my future focus, I'm currently in venture capital and doing a variety of things. My future focus is to see how I can improve and impact manufacturing. So I have an excellent lineup here, and I'm going to have everyone introduce themselves because I'm sure I can't do it justice. So Sath?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sath Rao. I'm the head of global manufacturing strategy with Zebra Technologies. Been in the industry for 20-odd years, both on the product development side, the software side, engineering, execution. Manufacturing is very near and dear to me. But for a short while, I was also working with an analyst firm called Frost & Sullivan, and as part of that role was instrumental in the acquisition of the Manufacturing Leadership Council. So did a little bit of dabbling in futurism in terms of future of manufacturing. But yeah, currently understanding the roles of what our customers are looking for in terms of manufacturing and trying to develop strategies to help address those evolving needs.
Good morning. My name is Randy Altschuler, and I am the co-founder and the CEO of Xometry. Xometry is a digital marketplace for custom manufacturing. So we connect thousands, tens of thousands of customers who want to buy custom parts from a range of industries, from aerospace to defense to automotive, robotics, all the medical devices, with thousands of manufacturers across the United States and across the world. And we use AI to do that, to create instant pricing and to optimize the match between the buyer and the supplier. We're based in Rockville, Maryland. We're HQ'd in Europe outside of Munich, and in Asia in Shanghai.
And good morning, everyone. My name is Liz Reynolds. I always start an introduction by saying I'm from Manchester, New Hampshire, an old mill town. I remember as a kid when the production shut down and things moved to China. Now I like to talk about the regenerative medicine going on in Manchester, New Hampshire. I'm a lecturer at MIT. I've been focused on issues of US competitiveness and manufacturing for over a couple decades, working on issues from startup to scale up, digitalization, and worked also for 3 different governors now on this topic. More recently, I was Special Assistant to the President for Manufacturing and Economic Development in the Biden administration until last fall. I went down to Washington to work on all things manufacturing. I worked on all things supply chain, but interestingly, of course, the flip side of resilient supply chains is in part domestic manufacturing, so worked on that agenda very aggressively.
Thank you. So it's really been fun meeting and getting to know the panelists because I've learned so much already in this short amount of time, and it makes me excited for the possibilities of the future. So in the next 35 minutes, we're going to attempt to talk about people, process, and technology, all within reference to supply chains and supply networks, and try and put an emphasis on the gaps. And I want to start with people. And when we look at the people in the workforce development, there's definitely a shortage in the United States. There's been a lot of talk about improving digitalization today so we can help fill those gaps and also upskilling the workforce. So Liz, I want to start with you. So you were heavily involved in MIT's task force for work of the future. I was wondering, did your team do research on attracting workers into manufacturing? And what was the overarching find, and what was your experience with that?
Sure, yes, so MIT put together several years ago a task force called Work of the Future, which we weren't trying to be clever, because of course everybody's talking about the future of work. But often when you talk about the future of work, there's a question mark at it. Remember the time, are the robots coming? They're going to take all our jobs. You know, our kids are in trouble. In fact, when we asserted the work of the future, what we were asserting was our challenge in this country is not going to be, are there enough jobs? Right? Our challenge in this country is the quality of jobs. And that, I think, has been part of the challenge for manufacturing. And so the task force really came out and talked about, yes, we need investment in technology, but we need investment in our workers as well. And what we've seen over the last 40 years is an atrophy of the institutions that have supported workers across the country, whether that's in terms of wages or benefits, et cetera. And that if we can reinvest in workers and help bring up those who have been in some ways left behind, the median worker has not seen an increase until recently in their income for over 40 years. That actually was a part and parcel of the strategy for reinvesting in our technology and in our workforce. And I think it speaks perfectly to the manufacturing agenda, where we have lost, you know, a couple generations of workers in manufacturing. And how do we bring them back? It's not only because of the interesting work, but it's also going to have to be about how we build quality jobs.
And I think that's spot on. And if you asked manufacturers in this country, and Xometry again has thousands of small manufacturers in our platform, and those are the manufacturers who make up the heart of American manufacturing, their number one issue is workforce. And in fact, even this morning I was speaking with some folks here who are manufacturers saying we don't have enough people. So when you think about American competitiveness, when you think about resilient supply chains, we can't run the second and third shifts that are required for us to be competitive. And just as Liz said, it's about the quality of jobs. These are high quality jobs. The machines that we're using for manufacturing, thanks to Formlabs and others, are high-tech machines. So it requires programming knowledge, and we are just not training enough people in that, emphasizing that enough to our young people as they're coming up into the workforce. And we need to make a concerted effort, both the private and the public sector, to push that emphasis on manufacturing jobs to the forefront.
Thank you. And Sath, I was wondering if you could add to that about how do we keep manufacturing jobs exciting? Because I think that's a big aspect. The millennials today are not interested in doing the hard, dirty work that they envision manufacturing as being.
Yeah, so Jane, perhaps I'll give you a quick anecdote from my early career days, wherein I was working for a large global enterprise procurement construction company, right? So it was a joint venture between Bechtel and the Pacific Corps, and we were setting up large refining units around the world. And the first thing that we did when we got a purchase order for a project was figure out the valves that were used in the process industry. Valves are, pretty humongous in size, and can perhaps a human being can stand inside one of those valves. And really, the first thing we had to do in the project was make sure that the purchase orders for valves were released, because the delivery schedule was 36 months. And so, and it was, from a supply chain context, it was very interesting that the valve was cast in Poland or Czechoslovakia. It was shipped to India for machining, shipped back to Germany for advanced internal ceramic coating, and then delivered to the site in the Middle East. So look at that dynamics, and then fast forward 15, 20 years, and you are now a leading welding company in the Midwest, now offers 3D printing for these complex valves. The delivery cycle is a week. They still keep some buffer, but it's 3 weeks. So as opposed to 36 months is roughly 144, 145 weeks, we are down to 1 week in a span of about 15 years. And therefore, from the point of view of the jobs, the kind of training that we need, and the impact on the supply chain, and it's become more efficient. But yes, you require complex, exotic material science knowledge. You need to be in a position to invest in some of these latest technologies to figure out how the engineer who's perhaps designing this, so it's the modern day paradigm of a manufacturing worker is actually an engineer, with an advanced PhD, and is no longer, somebody who's only doing, labor. And so I think those changes are upon us now, and clearly that general paradigm shift of saying, oh, look, somebody who did not do a college course, is fit for manufacturing is kind of changing as well. So it's advanced degrees, technical capabilities, and yeah, sometimes not necessary to have degrees. A lot of vocational training going on. As Liz mentioned, some of the other countries are very aggressive around training workforce, and I think we got to look at that too.
Yeah, I agree. So we need to bring the sexy back to manufacturing to get people to participate. So Randy, you mentioned earlier about people and the private and public partnerships. Can you elaborate a little bit on that further and your impressions on how that's going to support manufacturing?
Yeah, I mean, again, I start with, as parents, and I have 3 children of my own, what are we telling our children about the great professions to be in? And I think we need a rebranding of manufacturing right now for these younger generations, that it's almost like the next Silicon Valley. If you're in manufacturing, you're going to be involved with creating the devices that are going to save our future, whether it's combating climate change, going into space, leading medical devices, and manufacturing is at the heart of that. And the good news here is in the United States, we have a tremendous educational institutions. The community colleges in particular are great value for the money. It allows you to have wide participation across a wide spectrum of American. So folks that are traditionally underrepresented are in these community colleges. And Xometry is collaborating with community colleges in 6 different states to pay for 250 scholarships. We should be doing that on a much broader scale, and it's a public-private partnership. We need the federal government, we need the local governments, but then we can work together with businesses to help pay for these kinds of scholarships and train these highly skilled workers. These are great jobs, high-paying, very sticky, lots of job security. If we work together, we can train the next generation of American manufacturers.
Jane, can I mention, yesterday I was at Tulip at their Operations Calling event on a panel with a kid. I think I'm allowed to call him a kid. He's 2 years out of high school, and he'd attended the Medford vocational training program in robotics, automation, and engineering, and moved right from there into a startup, Inkbit, and he is the profile of the next generation that we want to bring in. And let me tell you, he had no time for us old folks. Like, don't tell me what I can't handle, just bring it on. Right. So and that's a school that has 60 spots in the high school in that program. It should be 2 or 3 times that. It's going to take us a lot of time and investment, again, public-private, to build that up.
Yes, I agree. And actually, I had no intention of going into manufacturing when I was in college. But I needed money, so I got a summer job at a chemical plant. And that summer job turned into 16 years where I learned about control systems and automation and process control and working with operators from a bottoms-up approach. And it really changed my view of the world, and it was fun for me. So somehow we have to bring that fun to all those students who are in high school and in community colleges or in college, and show them how exciting it is to make things and to make a difference in that way. So a little bit about moving on to process. So Sath, you worked on research mapping the vision of the future in manufacturing with the Manufacturing Leadership Council. How have things changed, and how is technology addressing the gaps?
Yeah, no, great question. So this was done in, I think, 2012, and we were supposed to create a vision for 2030. So I guess we still have 7 more years to see that vision unfold. But broadly, as consultants, we came up with these 4 quadrants and basically trying to develop a map of the future. And for purposes of today's panel, we'll only focus on the left side of that quadrant, which was essentially human-to-machine convergence, and the bottom half of the quadrant was cognitive platforms. And really on the human-to-machine convergence held the most promise about 10 years ago, because manufacturing always had the challenge of having the right workforce, et cetera. And I think it was early days for us to take those bets on technology, and we called out that, look, the robotic focus will be extreme, and we've actually seen that being voiced by some of our customer interviews. People talk about empowerment for workers, and the earlier example of supply chain. But one quick anecdote was this again Midwestern welding company who kind of is now using a robotic arm to automate the welding process. And welders are very hard to find in the US, good quality welders. But now, and in this small company, which was turning away jobs because they couldn't find the right workers, now using robotic arms, welding, and advanced AI and machine vision systems, is able to check the quality of the robotic 3-axis or 6-axis robotic arm, which is automating the welding process, and they are able to take on more work than they had ever imagined. So this human to machine convergence is a big area. And then in terms of cognitive platforms, the newer set of technologies on IT/OT side, which is enabling a lot of things. Earlier the focus was on IT/OT, like you said, from a process perspective, it was like, oh, there's a big divide. They have different KPIs and matrices, but right now, the evolving definition of IT/OT convergence is around newer technologies on the IT side, like AI and workflows being brought into play, and then on the OT side, robotics, machine vision, things which the conventional automation architecture were just not designed to handle, right? I mean, S95 never had those components built in. And really from bringing it back to the world of manufacturing and the workers who are having a tough time looking at manufacturing and saying, wow, this is exciting, it's primarily because they find the job dull. And they find the job dull because there's no sense of purpose of kind of saying, look, I can do something to change the equation. And then therefore, worker empowerment becomes extremely important. That enabled with AI, I think is the way forward.
I agree. Randy, do you have some to add?
No, I don't.
Liz, when you're working with you work with MIT and the Office of President Biden on the manufacturing strategy. What have you seen, say, in the last year in the improvements in technology and the changes that are happening? What kind of policy needs to go with that, with the CHIPS Act and with everything that's going on?
Well, I think one of the things that's been spoken about already is, first and foremost, that I think we're starting to see our manufacturing base, and I say we as maybe from the public sector point of view, through the lens of supply chains. This is not the way we were understanding the economy in the past. I mean, the concentration of semiconductors in Taiwan has been well understood for a very long time. But it was only at the time of the pandemic that we started to see the vulnerability for the country. The same goes for PPE and for other areas, so that really our national and economic security were put at risk. So that, I think, is now a profoundly different way in which the private sector is looking at resilience, but now the public sector is also interested in resilience. We are now in a place where, whether it's for geopolitical reasons, climate reasons, health reasons, that we need to understand what does resilience mean, and certainly from a position of setting up your supply chain, it could mean more domestic production, it could mean localization, moving things to Mexico, it could mean friendshoring, allies and partners, etc. But I think also resilience means an investment, and I think that what we saw from the public sector side was what's the role for incenting that investment? Resilience is not cost-free, right? We've invested a ton in efficiency at the cost of resilience. Now we need to see a step up that way. And the Economist recently was, more complexity, more cost. Yes, resiliency means potentially more complexity and more cost. But if you look at the work of David Simchi-Levy at MIT, on his work on resilience and time to respond, 10-day delay or 10-day shutdown of production in Taiwan in semiconductors equals 300 days before your supply chain is back on track, which is why as a country we are still not in, back to pre-pandemic levels. People will say we're not out of the woods, and I think the interesting question for a lot of us is to say, what is the new normal? What does out of the woods look like going forward?
Thank you. It's hard to stay out of technology, so we'll just dive into it. So, Randy, I did some background look at Xometry and what you're doing there, and it's really fascinating with the AI-powered digital marketplace. I was wondering, how do you see AI influencing and impacting the supply chain of the future?
Yeah, so Xometry does, every quarter we do polling together with Forbes and Zogby, both manufacturers and manufacturing customers. And the number one issue wasn't automation, it wasn't software, it was AI. And so that is on the mind of manufacturers and their customers. So I think the ability for, and this again goes back to, if you're a small manufacturer, you're just learning what AI means. And so when we think about the way that, these public-private partnerships and where the government can help our small manufacturers, again, who really make up, there's about 600,000 manufacturers in the United States, 75% of them have less than 25 employees. So that is the face of American manufacturing. And if AI is where everybody is concerned and where we know there's great opportunity, then the ability for the federal government, the local governments, to help these small manufacturers understand that together with the private sector will be critical for us to be able to compete. And so that, I think AI in particular, and again, we use AI at Xometry to create prices for both the buyer and the supplier. We use AI to optimize the match between the buyers and the suppliers, and that's another element of supply chain that's important, which is it's very fragmented. Manufacturing across this country is heavily fragmented. So if you're a small manufacturer in Houston, Texas, you may be all about oil and gas industry, but there may be a great opportunity in Boston to help a medical device company. That medical device company could never find you, and you could never find them. The long tail of the internet had never touched these small manufacturers. So the ability to use AI to enable those manufacturers to service these customers across the country is powerful. And then the good news is that enables these manufacturers to get their products to market faster and to build these resilient supply chains that they need. And part of that resiliency is having it right here domestically in the United States.
So, Sath, are you seeing the same kind of thing with Zebra Technologies? I know you're building the strategy for transformation.
Yes, so, and I'll go back to an anecdote about 3 or 4 months ago. I had a chance to visit Eastern Europe, and which was part of a Zebra manufacturing maturity model assessment study. This was an automotive tier 2 manufacturer. And we did the plant walkthrough, and then we were at the mezzanine floor, and our plant host basically was looking at us, and we were intently looking at a work cell, and there were 4 bays, and I guess only 2 were occupied. And he tapped us on the back and said, "Hey, don't turn around now, but the lady who's working on the bay looking at the fender is actually from Ukraine. And look, she's here because she's temporarily working. Nobody wants to do this job because it's a tough job and it's a dull job, because she was actually looking at the fender, a finished fender, and visually inspecting it and polishing it with her hands. And nobody wants to do it." And for us, it was a live example of where you could use AI out of the box with machine vision, which could actually look at surface aberrations and imperfections and very quickly give you a quick fix using, and we happen to have, one of the latest acquisitions is around Matrox, which is a machine vision company with AI, but as Randy said, AI to connect others, but this is AI inside the box and right out of the box, which is actually solving problems which otherwise could not have been solved, right? Or required visual inspection, which is very laborious and very hard on the eyes, etc. So we are not displacing jobs, but empowering the worker to kind of take more meaningful jobs. And so I think AI has that transformative impact. And Liz, maybe a pointer here for immigration and such activities, but one big way of solving these challenges is allowing talent to come from other parts of the world to the US as well.
Yeah. We, just on that point, we have 16,000 graduates every year in foreign students in the STEM area. And I think our goal as a country should be to have all 16,000 of them staying for a period of time. That's going to be part and parcel of our, of the strategy.
Yeah, definitely, it has to be. And when we had our pre-discussion, I thought it was really interesting. You were talking about digitizing the middle. And the only way we're going to be successful as a country is if we digitize the middle. So can you elaborate on that further and explain the concept behind that?
Yes, I think that actually, as everyone has said here, is that we see all this technology, and this has been part of the discussion more, but how are we actually having companies adopt it? What are the barriers? And the small and medium-sized firms obviously don't necessarily have all the resources or the incentive to do this. And we are at this extraordinary moment for the country. We have both the technological advances that we've been talking about. We have a change in the geopolitical landscape, everything else we've talked about in terms of supply chains. And then we have this enormous public policy shift. If people have paid attention in the last year plus of these three pieces of legislation, investment in our infrastructure over $1 trillion in 10 years, investment in our semiconductor base, which is over 70 billion, and investment in our clean energy infrastructure, which Goldman Sachs estimates over the next decade will be over $3 trillion. All of that speaks to rebuilding the US industrial base. And I often say I came out of the White House, exhilarated by the fact that this was an achievement. And then I became panicked. How are we going to land the plane? And there is no way that this is going to actually be feasible if we don't digitalize those small and medium-sized firms. There is the productivity lag in our small firms compared to our large firms is very significant based on technology. And to Randy's point, there are, I think, steps in the public sector, but I really think the private sector has to lead here, because it is not, again, the incentive structure is such that these firms do not trust the ROI on this unless they see it for themselves. And so digitalizing the middle is sort of my shorthand for this piece of the agenda. We have a vision for where we want to be in the next 5 to 10 years, and now we have to move to the how we're going to get there. And that's a key piece. And I think we see a number of states, I will just call out Massachusetts and Maryland as two states who have created funds that firms can access to matching funds for digitalization. We really have to think how we're going to do this at scale. Right now we're at onesies and twosies, and we understand that this is going to be about this transformation. And I think there's a lot of momentum if you look at public sector, private sector, others understanding that that's how we're going to take advantage of the moment.
And I think here's the good news. So many other parts of people's lives have become digitized. And at the end of the day, manufacturers are business owners. And so if it's payments or if it's retail shopping, if it's how they get around, and they're using digital platforms and they're doing it online and they are embracing that and their children are embracing that, now it's the right time for us to then have them embrace that in their day jobs and for them to improve their profitability, to improve their throughput, and to grow their business, then reinvest those dollars in buying more hardware, more machines, hiring more employees, raising wages. There's such a positive impact from that. So now is the time to do that. And likewise, on the customer side, embracing digitization, using platforms like Xometry to procure manufacturing, that will just speed things up. It'll enable us to share more of that across the country and across the world. The time is now.
And that same concept of the digital middle, right? If you look at the S95 architecture as well, I think the edge to core to cloud transformation is impacting that middle layer, the execution layer. We've heard about connected frontline worker software today, and how it's about citizen empowerment and development, etc. But I think the concept of decision entrepreneurship, which is equipping the frontline worker with all the right tools, a smart handle unit with software wherein they feel empowered to change, look at CAD files, make changes, fix issues. That's the sense of purpose that people want. before they kind of say, oh, this is very boring, right? I can't see the impact of my work. I'd rather go work in, maybe an industry where I'm working directly with customers and I see a smile on the face of the customer, right? Here, I don't see that interaction, the impact of my work. So I think those are all parts of that digital middle too.
Yeah, I mean, when you go to some of these startup, particularly, some of these aerospace companies, and you walk into those buildings, there is a palpable energy and excitement, literally a buzz from people from all different backgrounds and all working in different jobs, but all united in that purpose to build something, and something that's going to make an impact. That is invigorating, and we need that kind of enthusiasm and momentum.
I mean, everything I'm hearing is exciting, but I can't help but remember that earlier this year I visited a small OEM factory in Houston area, and they wanted some input on how to get started. So I toured their facilities, and there's no air conditioning in the warehouse, there's no Wi-Fi, there's nothing, there's no computers, there's absolutely nothing. So I gave a long presentation and did a long Q&A about what's possible with technology, but making that first step where you actually invest in the infrastructure of a small facility is tough. So will in your opinion, the policy changes, the public-private partnerships, and the fast advances in technology, will that make a difference to those small and mediums? Just anybody?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm gonna boldly say, yes, and so I think that the one thing about this industrial transformation is that actually what's so interesting is it actually happens everywhere. Every community, every state, regions have an industrial base in most cases, and they're all facing the same situation. I think that what we're seeing, particularly from a public policy point of view, is that actually these investments are going everywhere, right? Clean energy investments, semiconductors, obviously, in particular locations. And what's going to really make these things take off is that local ecosystem, right? That we drive competitiveness through specialization, and a specialization is driven by building expertise in particular places. And so it's really going to be incumbent upon, I think, regional ecosystems to figure out how are they going to bring their small and medium-sized firms into the picture. Now, there are some carrots and sticks that are involved in this federal funding. Each of this, all of the IRA funding grants or CHIP grants, you have to show how you're going to bring in the small and medium-sized firms, also how you're going to diversify your supply chain. All of those things are part and parcel of kind of making sure that everyone benefits from this. But in the end, I really think we need, we're going to have a regional awareness, but we really need kind of a national awareness that this is, without this, I mean, look at the competition. How do the Germans do it? How are the Japanese doing it? How are the Chinese doing it? There's a much more, frankly, a much more top-down approach. And I think we need a combination of top-down, bottom-up to actually make that transformation happen here.
I think just touch on what Liz was saying about local too. I mean, there is quite a paradigm shift that efficiency used to mean far-flung supply chains, eking out any dollar by going globally, and now you can get efficiency thanks to the digital tools that we have in Revolution by keeping it local, and in fact, that may be the better option. And it's a real shift, but it's a powerful one which will benefit local communities, whether it's here in the United States or Europe or whatever, however you define domestic. You can make your local manufacturer be the best option for you.
So from our experience, just during COVID, we realized that there was a possible opportunity for a small printer. We ended up calling it the Soho printer because people were quitting and deciding that they didn't want to work anymore, but they wanted to work on their hobbies, and you have various other platforms of people kind of creating. So it's a creator economy, right? And so that product line from Zebra has really taken off. And so to that point about small and medium enterprises, they could well be the hub of future innovation, right? And smart engineers banding together and feeding into the SpaceXs of the world who are kind of disrupting traditional industries, but really the nature of value add is of a higher order. So I think there's opportunities for innovation all across the spectrum.
All right, thank you. So one last question, just wanted to get your viewpoint on the hype of AI and generative AI, and how do we get through that hype without destroying all the possibilities that are there? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Maybe I can start, and then Randy can chip in as well. So he's right. I mean, he did his survey. There was a Manufacturing Leadership Council survey, and almost top of the mind for everyone is looking at AI for productivity gains. Now, it's interesting that I don't have a chart here, but if you look at Industry 3.0 and Industry 4.0, Industry 3.0, the US productivity levels went up and then started peaking during Industry 4.0. So it's very, very hard to imagine why Industry 4.0, with all its promise of new technologies, has not given the kind of results that we were hoping it would. And the answer perhaps is in this cognitive platforms that I talked about in the vision of future of manufacturing, which is, how can we drive that next wave of productivity on the shop floor? Because we have already optimized to what just one human being can do, or a bunch of human beings together can do on the plant floor. Now it's the next wave of productivity gains using AI, when they are leveraging tribal knowledge within the manufacturing plant to, and the aging workforce is a permanent challenge here in the US and in Europe as well, and how that institutional knowledge can be used to do everyday tasks to drive that next wave of productivity gains. So I think it will go beyond the hype stage into real actionable insights in terms of empowering the worker take much better informed decisions based on data. And so in a way, it will also be a data-led revolution.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's spot on. I mean, this is AI in the instance of manufacturing is not a value destroyer, it's a value creator. We don't have enough people doing it. So if you are a manufacturer and you can't get more employees and you've got 20 employees, if each of those can be 10% more efficient by using AI, that will enable your business to thrive. It'll enable you to buy more software from Autodesk. It'll enable you to buy more 3D printers, et cetera. And then your output increases, you get more customers, you're able to grow your business. Then we start attracting more people because young people want to go to businesses that are growing, industries that are thriving, and it creates that knock-on effect. So if anything, it's a value creator here. And if I'd say there's one thing that we all need to embrace in manufacturing, it is AI.
Yeah, I have nothing to add except I'm a big fan of the virtuous cycle that Randy has just outlined.
Yes. So we're going to wrap it up here, and I know our panelists will be around for some time the rest of the day, and so you're welcome to ask any individual questions that you'd like. Thank you very much for your attention.